My ex-wife left me for her female coworker. Now they're married, want to adopt my son, and secretly plan to take him to Spain without me. Hey everyone. I'm a 35-year-old guy, and I was married to my ex-wife, who's 34, for 7 years. 2 years ago, out of nowhere, she came out as a lesbian. I didn't see it coming at all. Turns out, she had been having an affair with a woman from work, a coworker she met about a year before we got divorced. We have an 8-year-old son together, so this hit even harder. When she told me, it completely shattered me. I was blindsided, heartbroken, and honestly, I felt like my whole marriage had been one big lie. I gave 7 years of my life to someone who turned out to be living a completely different truth behind my back. When I confronted her, she told me she had been struggling with her identity and only came to terms with it after meeting her partner. She said she tried to fight those feelings for a long time. I asked her if she ever truly loved me, and she said she did, but not in the same way she loved her new partner. That answer crushed me. The divorce process moved quickly. She didn't ask for anything financially, and we agreed on sharing custody of our son equally, 50-50ths. But I decided to cut off personal contact with her and handled all the custody logistics through my sister, who's 27. I even moved in with her right after the split. We sold the house, and we agreed that the leftover money would go into a college fund for our son. I couldn't stand being in that house anymore. It was a constant reminder of the betrayal I'd just gone through. For a little more context, she used to introduce her partner to me as just a friend from work, and I had no reason to doubt her. They'd go out for girls' nights often, and now I realized that was just a cover for the affair. For about 6 months, I spiraled into a deep depression. I kept asking myself what I did wrong, but deep down, I knew this was one of those situations where nothing I could have done would have changed the outcome. That just made it sting even more. Everything she'd said to me, especially during our wedding, all felt fake in hindsight, like she was just keeping up appearances. The only two people who really helped pull me through were my sister, who I'll always be thankful for. She helped with my son and supported me while still handling her own life, and my college ex-girlfriend. We reconnected at a college reunion about 4 months after my divorce, and her support during that time meant the world to me. At first, it was just friendship, but about a year after the divorce, we started dating for real. Eventually, I introduced her to my son. Throughout all this, my ex's partner didn't really have much contact with my son. That wasn't because I said anything, it was my ex who wanted to take things slow so he could adjust. My son's at that tricky age where he gets what's happening on the surface but doesn't fully grasp the depth of it. He knows his mom has a girlfriend, and he understands we're not together anymore. We hadn't sat him down for a serious talk about LGBTQ+ stuff yet, figuring we'd wait until he was older, but overall, he seemed to be doing okay and had accepted the divorce. Then about 8 months ago, my ex told me she was moving in with her partner and that they were getting engaged. We still weren't talking much, just brief convos about our son, but she invited me to their wedding. I politely declined. They were planning a destination wedding in Spain, which is where her partner lives. She wanted to take our son along, meaning he'd have to miss a whole week of school so he could meet her fiancé's family. I told her it didn't make sense for him to skip that much school and suggested she schedule the wedding during one of his breaks, especially since they hadn't picked a specific date yet. But she said that their wedding date probably wouldn't line up with his school vacations, and they were planning to get married soon. I gave in because, honestly, I didn't want to keep having back and forths with her, and technically, it was within her rights to include him. The real issue started after the wedding. It was supposed to be my week with our son, but she said she wanted to take him on their honeymoon so he could bond with his new stepmother. I reminded her that she'd already had 2 full weeks with him, one before the wedding and the wedding week itself. I told her I had plans with him, just us two. I'd taken time off work to take him to a motorcycle expo and build a huge Lego set together. Those are 2 things he's crazy about. She argued that because her partner had a demanding job, she hadn't had much time to spend with our son, and this was the perfect chance. I pushed back and said she already had 2 weeks to help them connect. She claimed the wedding stuff kept them too busy. At that point, I stood firm and said the custody schedule is in place for a reason, and I wasn't budging on that. She got frustrated and left, but me and my boy had a blast. I even surprised him with one of those kid-sized motorcycles. He was over the moon. We eventually went back to our usual routine of alternating weeks. Then one day, I saw that my ex posted a photo shoot with her, her partner, and our son under the caption #lesbianmummies. At first, I brushed it off, thinking it was just a post and didn't really mean much. But the way it portrayed them as a family, it didn't sit right with me. The next time my son was with me, I gently asked if his mom had been saying anything new. He hesitated, then admitted she'd been trying to get him to call her partner mom. That hit me hard. I honestly didn't think she'd go that far, but clearly, I was wrong. I asked my son how he felt about that, and he said he was more comfortable calling her by her first name. It felt weird to him to have 2 moms. I told him that was totally fine and that he shouldn't feel pressured to do or say anything he didn't want to. I called my ex and asked to meet up because this wasn't something I was willing to talk about over the phone. I told her straight up that I didn't think it was okay for her to try and convince our son to call her wife mom. Her partner wasn't actively parenting him, and big decisions like this needed both of us to agree. She tried to argue that since my girlfriend and I were getting serious, I might want him to start calling her mom too. I shut that down right away. Even if we do end up staying together long term, I'd never push that on him. He already has a mother and a father, he doesn't need extra parental titles thrown at him. Then she dropped a bomb on me. She said she and her wife were hoping that sometime in the future, they could file for adoption. She added that I'd still get to visit and spend time with my son. She told me that she and her wife wanted to have full legal guardianship of my son so they could build a new family together. I shut that down immediately. I made it clear that there was absolutely no way I'd agree to that and that neither of our partners had any authority over parenting decisions. She fired back by calling me homophobic, accusing me of standing in the way of her having a complete family. I told her point blank her personal life is her business, but when it comes to our son, those choices have to be made by the two of us, not her and her wife. I ended the conversation there. Later, I told my son that if his mom ever tried to pressure him into doing something he didn't feel comfortable with, he should always come to me. About 3 weeks went by, and then my son mentioned that his mom had signed him up for Spanish lessons, which he said he absolutely hated. For context, my ex is Latina, and her wife is from Spain. Spanish is their go-to language when they talk to each other. Back when we were married, we'd agreed to raise our son speaking English, mostly because my ex was more fluent in English than Spanish and I don't speak Spanish at all. When I brought it up with her, she said she wanted our son to feel more connected to his roots. I told her I didn't have an issue with that, bilingualism is great, but we'd already tried this a few times before, and our son had shown no real interest. She insisted that it might be different now, with 2 Spanish speakers at home. I said sure, I'm all for learning new languages, but if he's not into it, why push it? Maybe he'd be more open to learning something else. That's when she went off again, accusing me of robbing him of his heritage and denying his identity. Then, like clockwork, she circled back to claiming I was blocking her from having a real family. My girlfriend usually keeps out of these things, but even she told me I should talk to a lawyer and get some clarity. My lawyer, who also happens to be a longtime friend, told me straight up that if my ex ever filed for adoption, I could challenge it. Unless I'd completely abandoned my kid or done something extreme, no court would approve that over my objections. That gave me some peace of mind. Still, my ex has been posting photos of her wife, and my son online, trying to paint this picture-perfect family image. It's really started getting under my skin. About 2 weeks ago, I had my first face-to-face conversation with her new wife since the divorce. She reached out and asked to meet. She told me that my ex had finally started healing after the social fallout of coming out and building a new life with her, and that I was now the one getting in the way. According to her, I had been emotionally distant during the divorce and manipulated the custody terms to get my way. She said I should just accept the idea of adoption in a few years, because she's always wanted a child and I would still be dad, just not the only parent. I told her flat out that I didn't care about whatever emotional healing my ex was going through at the time of the divorce. The 50-50 custody arrangement was fair by any reasonable standard. And if they wanted the perfect nuclear family, they could have a child of their own, one that didn't come with strings attached to me. What worries me most is how all of this is starting to affect our son. He doesn't seem as cheerful as he was just a few months ago when we were all slowly adjusting to the new situation. Just to give some extra background, because I know it'll come up eventually, my ex faced a lot of backlash from her family after coming out. Her parents cut ties with her completely. They didn't even know about the affair, but just the fact that she came out was enough for them to walk away. When my son is with me, though, he still sees his maternal grandparents. They agreed to stay in his life as long as they kept their personal views to themselves, and so far, they've stuck to that. I've been present for every visit just to be sure, and they've shown nothing but love and respect to our son without bad-mouthing his mother. As for the rest of her family, they've pretty much abandoned her too. Some did it because of the cheating, others because of her sexuality. Our old circle of mutual friends, most of whom were my coworkers and their spouses, also cut ties with her over the affair. I never asked them to choose sides, they made that decision on their own. Ironically, my ex used to complain that she didn't get along with her coworkers, so when she finally said she made a friend, I was genuinely glad. We all know how that turned out. I don't think they're planning on running away with my kid or anything. I have all his documents, including his passport, which we agreed during the divorce would stay with me. She gave everything back after they returned from the wedding trip, and there haven't been any new requests since. I honestly think all this talk about adoption stems from how close my son is with his mom. The only two things he's ever come to me about are her trying to get him to call her partner mom, and those Spanish lessons he doesn't want to take. During the pandemic, I did have to travel out of state a few times to care for my sick parents, so she was the primary caregiver during those periods. My sister, who's usually a huge help, was overseas on assignment back then, so I couldn't rely on her like I do now. My ex also brought up money when we argued about adoption. Her partner has a high-paying senior position, while my ex earns less than I do, but together, they're more financially stable than I am on my own. They claim they could give our son a better life with private school and more opportunities. Maybe the recent elections stirred up some anxiety for them, making them feel like the window for adoption might close. But they haven't filed anything yet, and I doubt they will anytime soon. Update 1. Hey again. I've read through a lot of your comments, and I wanted to share an update. First off, my son and I have both been in therapy since the divorce. He was doing really well until the two moms situation started creating confusion. Yes, my ex's parents completely disowned her after she came out. They had no idea about the affair, and they only agreed to stay in their grandson's life under strict rules, no preaching, no badmouthing. And they've kept their word. I've personally attended every visit just to be sure. Her extended family? Most of them walked away too. Some were mad about the affair, others over her sexuality. All our shared friends? Gone. They chose to cut her off themselves, and I had nothing to do with that. When she finally told me she made a new friend, someone she really clicked with, I was actually happy for her. And yeah, that's who she ended up with. As for documents and legal stuff, there's no drama there. I hold all of my son's IDs and papers. That was part of the original divorce agreement because she was still figuring out where to live, and I was staying with my sister. Everything's been secure. She even returned the passport without any issues after their trip. I think her pushing for adoption comes from the bond she has with our son, not necessarily anything sinister. He's happy with her, and I'm glad he's close to his mom. But when she crosses the line, like asking him to call her wife mom or forcing him into Spanish lessons he hates, that's where I draw the line. I wasn't absent from his life. I did what I had to do during COVID to take care of my own family, and my sister agrees with that. After hearing from so many of you, I reached out to my lawyer again this morning. He told me exactly what he said before: it would take something extreme, like proven abandonment, for any adoption attempt to succeed without my consent. He also said, in his words, they're idiots if they think this is how the law works. He even told me that if they're pushing the adoption idea and trying to turn my son against me, and I can prove it, I could make a case for full custody. But luckily, that hasn't happened. My son hasn't said anything that suggests his mom is badmouthing me. That was a relief. So, I've decided to contact my ex with some conditions. 1. We both need to start using a parenting app to keep track of all communication and decisions. 2. No more discussions, direct or indirect, about adoption or encouraging our son to call her wife mom. 3. No more posting photos online of our son being branded as part of their perfect queer family. He's too young to consent to being plastered on the internet, and when he's old enough, he can decide for himself what he wants. When my son gets older, I do plan to explain everything to him more clearly. But before that, I needed to speak with my ex. We ended up meeting today. She had been busy the day before, and honestly, I needed a little more time to collect my thoughts anyway. When we sat down, I laid out my conditions. She said she was fine with using a parenting app to manage communication and decisions going forward. But when I told her to completely drop the idea of adoption and stop encouraging our son to call her wife mom, she looked visibly upset. She admitted that her family had been pressuring her to settle down and build a real family. Apparently, she got pregnant about a year and a half after we got married, not exactly too soon in my opinion, but she said that wasn't part of her plan. She said she stayed closeted for most of her life because of her strict parents and hoped that marrying me would suppress her true feelings. She told me she was mostly content with our life until she met her current partner. She opened up about going through postpartum depression after our son was born, which I never knew. I didn't realize she hadn't been ready to become a parent so quickly. She explained that she and her wife had talked about adopting my son because she wanted to start over, build the kind of life and family she had always dreamed about. She said she wasn't happy in our marriage, but now, with her wife, she felt like she finally had the life she wanted. She also said she didn't want our son to grow up resenting her for being a lesbian, especially since, according to her, he hasn't had much exposure to people like her. Now, I'll be honest here, I don't personally know anyone in the LGBTQ+ community, at least not in my immediate circle of friends or family. It's not something we talk about much, not because of any bias, but because it just never came up. But that doesn't mean I, or my son, are clueless. Especially not now, after the divorce. I told her this whole "he needs exposure" thing felt like an excuse, like she was trying to spin a narrative that somehow justified separating me from my son. We argued a bit, and then she finally came out with the real reason. And Reddit, some of y'all must be clairvoyant because your guesses were spot on. She admitted that she and her wife are considering relocating to Spain in a few years, and that's why they wanted to adopt my son. I told her straight up that it wasn't going to happen. Not only is she legally required to get my permission to take our son out of the country, just like she did for their wedding, but I've now looked into the laws in both countries, and I know my rights. She admitted they'd researched it too, and said they only brought it up to gauge whether I'd agree. If I said yes, they would have started planning. If not, they wouldn't move, because she didn't want to be separated from her child. I told her again, in no uncertain terms, there is absolutely no way I'm signing away my parental rights. I said, you divorced me, left me for another woman, and now you want me to hand over my son like nothing happened? That's insane. I made it crystal clear every interaction from now on would be documented, and if I so much as suspected she was planning something behind my back, I would file for full custody immediately. She looked stunned, like she hadn't expected me to stand my ground that hard. I think the idea of losing any custody scared her a little, and she agreed to back off. Then I told her something I should have said long ago: stop trying to craft this image of some perfect queer family online. Our son has one mom and one dad. He spends equal time with each of us. Her wife is not his second mom, and this fantasy she's projecting doesn't reflect the reality of our situation. If she wants to raise a child with her wife, they can absolutely do that, but not with my son. I also reminded her that in any future legal battle, I'm the more stable option. I work from home. I spend more face-to-face time with our son. And I've gone out of my way to maintain a healthy co-parenting relationship despite everything that's happened. I've done this so our son doesn't end up hating either of us, but if she keeps trying to edge me out of his life, I'll take action and deal with the emotional fallout later. I didn't want the conversation to spiral into another shouting match, so I got up and left. But before I did, I secretly recorded our talk just to have a backup in case things go sideways in the future. Truthfully, I'm still really angry at her. I've kept it buried during custody exchanges and therapy sessions, but deep down, that betrayal still burns. Her comment today about never being happy in our marriage, it cut deeper than I expected. I gave her 7 years of my life, and hearing her talk like it meant nothing, it reopened a wound I thought had started to heal. When I got home, I called my lawyer again. He told me the same thing: if they ever try anything like kidnapping or manipulating custody without consent, the courts will side with me in a heartbeat. Our current agreement is solid, and we built it that way on purpose. He said the decision to sue for full custody is mine, but warned that it's not something to take lightly. It would be a long, emotionally draining process, and I'd need to be absolutely sure I wanted to put both myself and my son through it. And I'm not. Not right now, anyway. My ex, despite all this, is still a good mom. She loves our boy, and he loves spending time with her. He's the kind of kid who's never afraid to speak up when something feels off, especially with me. So I trust he'll tell me if this stuff keeps happening. And just to clear something up, I'm not against Spanish lessons. I only pushed back because he clearly didn't like them. I even told my ex to consider trying a language he's more excited about. Now that I've seen the bigger picture, I realize those lessons were probably part of their plan to ease him into life in Spain. Makes a lot more sense now. To everyone who commented on my last post, thank you. Seriously. You helped me see this for what it really was. I hadn't even considered the possibility that she was planning to move our son abroad until I read your takes. You all saved me from missing something huge.